great to meet Akeem. He's so inspiring. He's got so many great thoughts. It's so good to see him in this space, kind of talking to people about how they get their story across.
The story touched me. You know, full of a lot of rejections, and was able to go through them and got to the top of it. That really moved me.
I love listening to Akeem's story and just the insightful and just out-of-the-box approach that he took to building and growing his business.
It's super inspiring to hear from him. I appreciated the vulnerability and the transparency. Like, he keeps it real. He's telling people exactly what he went through.
We have Akeem Shannon. The stage is yours.
What's going on, Finovate?
A few years ago, I got a full ride scholarship, and I lost that scholarship. But when I came home, I made myself a promise. I have to be making more than the average college graduate. I became the #1 sales rep at 2 Fortune 500 companies, making nearly 6 figures and had saved up 100 grand in cash. So, if I could do that for me, imagine what I could do for you. And she said, you know what, Mr. Shannon, now that you mention it, I think you can do something for us. What I realized was that I didn't change, but the story changed. And what I'm here to talk to you about today is the power that a story has to change the trajectory of your organization. I applied to be on Shark Tank. We get to the final round. They call me and they tell me, you're not gonna be on Shark Tank. And I was devastated. I got to figure something out. And I ended up finding Revolt Summit. This event, I knew I needed to talk to one person, the original D-O-double-G Snoop. Snoop's taking questions. They're like, one more question. And I'm one person away. So I take my phone out and I slap it onto the pillar right behind me. And he looks, he's like, bring him up there. I want to hear about that. That could be a product that's going to change the world. He invites me up to the stage. Snoop ended up calling Shark Tank. And that's how we got onto the show. Our product did not change, but the story changed. This conference, you will have opportunities. You'll have moments to share the story of your organization. And if you share that story, you'll get those opportunities too. I'm gonna give you a couple of tips. I came up with this thing called the 34-56 framework. 3 stories, 4 mindsets, 5 principles, and 6 audiences. We're gonna talk about what I think are the most important, which are your 3 types of stories. You know me, I'm gonna ask a question when I get the opportunity. And the person on stage was Mark Cuban. I said, a few years ago, you asked me where I sell flip sticks. Ask me where we sell flip sticks now. Last week we launched in Target and Best Buy. Crowds going nuts. I see the guys from Amazon. They were eating it up, loved it. They're evangelizing my entire story through the entire Amazon organization. And I start getting phone calls. I get texts from people. They're like, hey, you're in the training module for Amazon Pay. And they're like, Akeem, we want to feature Flipstick on the home page on Black Friday. And it all came, not because I told my story, but because I lived the story that other people went to go tell. That's all for me, guys. Thank you very much.
Next up is a simple product using a space-age material.
I gotta be honest, I didn't come here to rap. Came to talk about my business as a matter of fact. Might start a feeding frenzy as I spin on this track. So I asked all the sharks, sit back and relax. Flipstick is the brand. If you already heard about it, raise your hand. It's a kickstand on demand with Flipstick. Gravity is under your command. Let me repeat for those who missed it. To any flat surface, your phone will stick. Get it wet, but the stickiness will persist. Tell you how I thought it up, your town furnace. Flipstick is the brand. If you already heard about it, raise your hand. It's a kickstand on demand with Flipstick. Gravity is under your command. In summary, I came to Shark Tank for a brand, so I can put Flipstick in everybody's hands. Sharks, get a chance. I'll deliver ROI on your 100 grand. What's going on, Finovate? So we're going to change the mood just a little bit here. So forgive me, I know Ukraine is excited, but so listen, who do we have in the building? We have some people from the West Coast in the building. No, oh man, no home. What about the South? Couple of people, okay, international folks? All right, what about my East Coast people? There we go, there we go.
You just saw one of the highlights of my life, being able to get on Shark Tank. But it didn't start there. And so I want to tell you a quick story. It was a few years ago that I was interviewing for one of the biggest fintech companies in the entire world. Now, I won't tell you who it is, but I'll let you figure it out. And here I was sitting in the interview room, across from the interviewer. And she says, you know, Akeem, you're great, and you know, this has been a great session, but there's just one problem. You know, when we were looking at your resume, we thought you graduated college, but you didn't finish. And I said, listen, let me tell you a story. A few years ago, I got a full ride scholarship to study chemical engineering at Howard University. And I went there, and I lost that scholarship. My parents were devastated. There's no greater failure than letting down those who sacrificed everything for you to succeed. But when I came home, I made myself a promise that by the time my friends graduate college, I have to be making more than the average college graduate. Over the course of the last few years, I became the #1 sales rep at not one, but 2 Fortune 500 companies. And by the time my friends graduated, I was making nearly 6 figures and had saved up $100,000 in cash. So if I could do that for me, imagine what I could do for you. And she said, you know what, Mr. Shannon, now that you mention it, I think you can do something for us. And that's how I ended up working at the company that won't be named here. And what I realized was that I didn't change in that meeting, but the story changed. And what I'm here to talk to you about today is the power that a story has to change the trajectory of your organization. It was just a few years later that I applied to be on Shark Tank. And we go and apply in Las Vegas. We get past 40,000 people to the final round. It's just 150 people left, but they have to get down to 120. And they say, Akeem, you're so close. We're going to call you. We'll let you know what's going on. And they call me and they tell me, hey, you're not going to be on Shark Tank. And I was devastated. I had all my eggs in one basket, and I'm like, I got to figure something out because Shark Tank, well, it's off the table. So I go on this whirlwind tour. I'm hopping all over the place from the BET Awards. I'm going to conferences in Detroit. I'm everywhere trying to figure out how am I going to scale this business. I don't know, Facebook ads. I'm not on Amazon, but I have to figure out a way to make this thing happen. And I end up finding about a conference called Revolt Summit. It was very similar to this one. It was a music industry conference, so you can imagine it was a lot of bankers in the room. And we're down in Atlanta, and I had every plan to pitch. I think AT&T was giving away $10,000 at this pitch competition. I'm like, I'm going to pitch. All these rappers are going to be there. They're going to see me, and I'm going to make it big. Buy my ticket, got the VIP pass. Well, turns out pitch competition was closed. But I've already spent my money. So they said, well, we also have this music competition. We're giving away a record deal, Universal Music. I said, well, you know, I took music appreciation, high school. I can just write a rap, pitch my business in the rap, and, you know, it'll all work out. So that was my plan. I go to this music industry conference to rap a pitch for a business about a phone accessory. So I go. I rap. Somehow the judges love me. I get to the top 5. I'm going to be able to get on stage in front of DJ Khaled, Timberland, all these major rappers, and pitch my business in the form of a rap. And then, as they were reviewing the notes, they said, wait a minute, this guy's not a real rapper. He's trying to pitch his business. Disqualified. Are you serious? DJ Khaled's right there. I should be able to pitch my business. They said, nope, not happening. You're not going to do that here. And so I was sitting about where you are right now, front row. And right before this final competition, there was a comedy show. And I just knew, here I was at this event, I could not let this opportunity pass me by. So in the middle of the front row, I stand up, hold my product in the air. The comedian looks at me and using very colorful language I won't use today. He's like, bro, what are you trying to sell me? And I go into the full story of Flipstick, what you can stick it to, how our customers use it, how I got started. Eventually, that comedian lets me on stage, and I perform the rap on stage in front of the entire audience, and the same person that disqualified me took me to the back, and this group ended up buying thousands of flip sticks and flying me out to LA. Now, here's the thing. Nothing changed but the story. Once the story changed, the opportunity came. Now, I get out to LA, right? And at this event, they got flip sticks everywhere. They're giving them away. Everyone's coming up to me, talking to me. But I knew I needed to talk to one person and one person only. And that was the original D-O-double-G Snoop. He was on a stage just like this. Once again, I was right out there. And I asked him again and again. I said, will you please give me an introduction to Snoop? They said, nope, we're not going to do it. Can't happen. Well, I said, that's all right. Snoop's taking questions. I'm going to ask a question, and you know it's going to be a good one. So they're taking questions. They're like, one more question. And I'm one person away. Here I am, another conference. I'm not going to be able to ask the question. I have a flip stick with Snoop Dogg's face on it. I have to get in front of him. So I take my phone out, and I slap it onto the pillar right behind me. And Snoop's on stage. You know how Snoop is. Hi. And he looks. He's like, that mother lover over there just stuck his mother loving phone to the wall. And people were like, what's Snoop talking about? Is he high? He's like, no, he stuck his mother loving phone to the wall. Bring him up there. I want to hear about that. That could be a product that's going to change the world. He invites me up to the stage. He says, oh, he got Snoop on it. This man's a branding genius. And what ended up happening, Snoop ended up calling Shark Tank, and that's how we got onto the show. Thank you. Our product did not change at all, not one time. The company didn't change, the numbers didn't change, but the story changed. See, it was one thing to come and pitch the product, service, how it works, the features, the benefits, but when we came and we pitched the story, all of a sudden, there was magic there. Not just because the product was good, but because they wanted to be a part of the story. And what I'm here to tell each and every one of you is that when you are at this conference, you will have opportunities. You'll have moments to share the story of your organization. And if you share that story, you'll get those opportunities too. So, I wish I could tell you that it all worked out right. Shark Tank's been unlocked. We're getting ready to go on to the show. It's just all going to be gravy train from here, right? Well, it was about this time 4 years ago when we were on Shark Tank. And what did he just come out and talk about? The election. Turns out, my episode is going to air election week. I'm like, great. Everyone's going to be watching TV. It's going to be fantastic. One problem. That Friday, no one knew who the president was. And there was wall-to-wall coverage. In fact, they delayed the episode by 2 hours just so they could talk about what they didn't know and who was going to be president. And look, I was getting nervous, y'all. I'm not going to lie. I was like, oh, God. I was like, God, I know I am not going to get my Shark Tank episode canceled. And here's the thing. When you go on a show like Shark Tank, they let you know up front, hey, if we can't air it for some reason, an act of God, a terrorist attack, not our fault, can't sue us, won't air, too bad, so sad. I'm like, there's no way. That's not going to happen to me. Well, right as I gave that pitch, interrupting this regularly scheduled program to bring you a message from the candidates. And Joe Biden got on that stage and he said, folks, I got no information for you whatsoever. And in that moment, everything was taken. I did not get to share my story on national TV. I was devastated. And for each of you in this room, I'm sure you've had that opportunity where you almost closed that deal. You almost got that investor. You almost landed that customer. And then all of a sudden, it all fell out from underneath you. But see, I couldn't let this one go. So I said, look, I got to tell one hell of a story. I called ABC. And I said, listen, here's how I got here. Here's why I got here. Here's why I think that you should re-air the episode again. And I got a nice email from the showrunner, and he said, Akeem, you signed a 40-page contract saying that we would not re-air this episode. So I'm sorry, but you signed it, and that's the deal. That being said, we really feel for your story. And for the first time in the history of Shark Tank, we're going to re-air an episode in prime time, and not just in prime time, on New Year's Day. The views were off the charts. And ladies and gentlemen, because of the story I told, I got my shot and my opportunity. Thank you. See, we took that story and we not only told it to get on Shark Tank, but we landed in Target telling the story of our customers, how they were using the product. Best Buy, even on the Today Show. They even have my story, a big old picture at the Smithsonian Museum and the Museum of Natural History on the history of cell phones. Like, it was one of those things where I didn't realize that using these stories would change the trajectory of my business. And so for all of you, whether you're on stage here, whether it's in the hall, at your booth, whether it's on an elevator with someone that could be your potential customer or investor, I want you to make sure that you tell your story. And so I'm going to give you a couple of tips that I came up with for my team. As we expanded, I came up with this thing called the 3456 framework. 3 stories, 4 mindsets, 5 principles, and 6 audiences. Now, I heard you guys like numbers. We're not going to go through all these, though. We're going to keep it simple. But we're going to talk about what I think are the most important, which are your 3 types of stories. Number 1 is your start. I think a lot of times, especially as we grow and scale our organizations, we forget how important the start is. But let me ask you this. Where did Apple start? In a garage. We all know that story. That story mattered. That story got them on the news. It got them in media. It got people talking about them when they were up against that big giant Microsoft. And whether you're the founder of your organization, or maybe you started the company, the financial institution got started 40, 50 years ago, you always want to talk about your start. It can be how the organization started, or it can be how you personally got started within your industry. Number 2 is your mission. Why is it that your organization does what it does? And not just that, but why is it the best organization to do that in the entire world? Why is it that you have an unfair advantage over everyone else? Why is it that you come to work every day? That mission, when you share it correctly, it allows people to connect with you on the human level. See, we have 10,000 years of oral tradition that's hard-coded into our brains so that when we connect with each other through stories, people give you more time to sell them on whatever it is you're trying to win them over for. But the most important types of stories that you can tell are the stories of your customers. I remember we were talking to Target, and we had no business being in Target at the time, y'all. Like, we were teeny tiny. We didn't have any qualifications. Our factory was totally not certified. And we were in the meeting, and I remember I told her, she was talking about the types of customers that come into Target. And I told her the story of one of our influencers who found our product. I said, hey, we had this Gen Z influencer, just found our product organically. And his primary language is American Sign Language. Now, I don't know much about ASL, but I just figured, you know, if you can't talk, you can text. That was the whole AT&T ads they were running for years, right? And that wasn't the case. Because obviously, just like when we all communicate, you want to be able to express yourself. You want to have emotion. And so this kid was taking his flip stick, and he was sticking it on the wall, and he was able to communicate via FaceTime using both of his hands. It was so inspirational for me. And he was racking up tons of sales through our influencer program. And when I told that story to Target, her eyes lit up, and she was like, wow, that's the type of customers we want to come in our store. We don't have those customers come in our store, especially not the young ones. So when I shared that story of our customers, I saw that, wow, people connect with this. If my customers look like their customers, they'll say yes. If your customer sounds like them, they're going to say, wow, that could be me. And they'll give you that opportunity. So your start, your missions, your customers. Those are the types of stories that ultimately make a difference. And look, I will share with everyone, if you come find me after the break, our entire framework of how we tell stories. But for some of you, a framework is not enough, right? You need a whole blueprint. And if that's you, I find for a lot of smaller organizations, you know, you have a founder, you have someone that's very committed to the work that they're doing. They're not always the best storytellers. And if that's the case, I would highly recommend that you find yourself a story architect. This is beyond just sales. This is really how you frame the story of your organization so that whether it's a minute, it's 5 minutes, it's 7 minutes, you actually get your point across and ultimately set up those crucial follow-up meetings. So look, you guys have an option, all right? And it's really only one option on your next step. and that's to go out and share your story. And I'm going to give you a quick one about a client of ours. So I get a call about 45 days ago. Client, he's in logistics tech, struggling, okay? They got a pretty decent-sized organization, but the world's moving very fast. They got a lot of legacy Fortune 100 customers, and they're starting to get left behind. I sit down with him and his team for 3 hours, okay? It took them to tell me what it was they do. That's a big problem, okay? Huge problem. But they had this really great opportunity come up where they were going to be one of 12 companies that was going to pitch to like 40 of the top, Fortune 100s. And they're like, we cannot blow this opportunity. We took those 3 hours, we got them down to 7 minutes. Now, what I didn't know at the time was that they had been in a pitch with one of these companies a few months earlier. And not only did it go bad, it went so bad that the company was going to cancel the contract they already had with them. It was terrible. So we redo their entire story. We do the pitch. They win this competition, okay? And they end up getting a phone call immediately the next day from the largest manufacturer of mainframes in the entire world. And they're like, wow, we love your story. And I get a phone call from the client. He's so excited. He's like, look, we're going to do this. We got it. And not only that, after he had that meeting, they flew him out to Google and to Facebook because the people that put on the event were so impressed with the story that they're like, we got to get this guy everywhere. And it went to show me like, man, the change in 45 days, the company is no different. Product's no different. Technology's no different. The only thing that changed was the story. And so I encourage each of you to go out today, share your story. Come find me if you need a little bit of help. I'll be auditing stories in real time at the session, and we can make something happen. So that's my story, and I'm going to give you one bonus since I got 60 seconds. Give you a little bit more inspiration before you leave at another conference. So I was in Austin. This is maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, and a conference called Afrotech. And so we were in a big auditorium, and it was huge. I mean, had to be maybe 7,000 or 8,000 people. And you know me, I'm going to ask a question when I get the opportunity. And the person on stage was Mark Cuban. Now, if you go and watch my episode, you'll see Mark was a little nasty to me. And I remember that type of stuff. And so as we're at the event, I get to ask my question. I get up front and I say, hey, Mark, a few years ago I was on Shark Tank. And you told me, and I quote, your sales suck. Well, ask me what my sales are now. And he's like, well, what are your sales are now? I said, last month we did 150K. And he's like, okay. I said, a few years ago, you asked me where I sold flip sticks. Ask me where we sell flip sticks now. I said, last week we launched in Target and Best Buy. Crowds going nuts. And Mark was a good, he played well with it. He didn't give me any money. He didn't invest. He didn't respond to any of my emails. But guess what happened? In the hall later that evening, I see the guys from Amazon. They were in the room. They were eating it up, loved it. And what I find out is over the next few weeks, they are evangelizing my entire story through the entire Amazon organization. And I start getting phone calls. Hey, Akeem, we want to feature you. I get texts from people. They're like, hey, you're in the training module for Amazon Pay. And eventually, Black Friday rolls around. They're like, Akeem, we want to feature Flipstick on the home page on Black Friday. I said, you got to be lying. And it all came, not because I told my story, but because I lived a story that other people went to go tell. That's all for me, guys. Thank you very much.